Hello there, people of the internet. So interesting conundrum for you guys today. Why are Finnish Mosins so much more expensive and so much more desirable than Russian Mosins? Kind of a head scratcher on that one. I mean, anyone who's in the community already knows the answer to this, but I still think it's fun to go ahead and talk about it. Finnish Mosins are definitely a pricier, more expensive Mosin than their Russian counterparts. This is a Finnish Mosin 1891 refurbishment. Yes, there are sights missing. People always point that out to me in these videos. Well, before we get started, these rifles and this ammunition I'll be running today, not free. If you want to support my work, then Utreon and Patreon links are in the description below. That'll definitely help me make more content more often. So I have a Finnish Mosin. This is an 1891 Mosin. And I have a Russian Mosin. This is a 9130. You've already seen both of these rifles on this channel. But this 9130 is nothing special. This is actually an unrefurbished one. And the beauty about these Mosins is, even though they are more expensive than they used to be, they're still pretty much on the affordable side. $350 will get you a 9130. That's in decent shape. I mean, you're not going to get all the bells and whistles with it, but $350 will get you a Mosin if you dig around and look in places that aren't gun broker. But a Russian, round receiver, Izhvesk, no bells and whistles, nothing special Mosin, these right here run you about $350. Whereas any kind of Finnish Mosin, this is probably the least expensive of the Finnish Mosins. Any kind of Finnish Mosin is going to run you a premium. Nowadays, in 2022, an 1891 Mosin is going to run you about $500, maybe $550, depending on the condition. But I have seen Finnish Mosins, including 1891 Mosins, that aren't in all that of great shape, much like this one right here. I've seen these go for, $8, $9, $1,000 because they are a Finnish Mosin. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but the reasons that are there, I mean, depending on the model of Mosin that we're talking about, I don't necessarily think that they are worth the massive price jump. For, one of these, you could pick up 3 of these right here, and they both send 7.62x54 rimmed downrange. Granted, the Russian Mosins do require a little bit of work and effort to get them running smoothly, but it does not take a lot of polishing and a lot of fitment and work to really get these things running incredibly smoothly. You guys have seen how fast I can run my Mosins on my channel because of just how smooth I've managed to get the bolts. Not only just from consistently using them, but just going in and knowing where the camming surfaces are and just polishing them just a very small amount. It does not take much to get these to go from being sticky, gritty actions to being actually incredibly nice actions. Well, the Finnish know that, and they did that themselves. So Russian Mosins, a lot of times they're sticky and gritty, but Finnish Mosins, because these are done, basically by the Finns from their country before they handed them out to their soldiers and before they sold them off to the surplus market, all of the polishing and whatnot was already done with these Mosins. Whereas on your Russian Mosins, the Russians were like, "Here you go, comrade, take Mosin, it is good rifle, go kill fascists with it." And this soldier was out there trying to bash this handle open with his stuck Mosin because his steel case ammunition had stuck the thing, so he's over there beating it against a tree trying to unlock his Mosin, and it just... If you know how to polish up a Mosin's bolt, maybe I'll make a video on that down the road, but if you know how to polish up a Mosin's bolt and get the action running incredibly smoothly, then you can really, really get these rifles going very, very smoothly. And the Finnish knew how to do that, and they did that very well. So the actions on your Finnish rifles are going to be incredibly smooth compared to your standard Russian ones. There are Russian ones out there that are incredibly smooth as well, but the Finnish ones are just... They're top notch. Anyone who's ever ran a Finnish rifle knows the fitment and whatnot on the Finnish Mosins. is damn near perfect. The Finnish, whenever they refurbished their rifles, they would also, you know, refurbish the barrels and whatnot, and they did things with the sights, and they adjusted their triggers to have better trigger pulls. They did a lot of things to get their Mosins to be as good as possible. Now, I don't have an M38 out here, but the Finnish M38, is it M38 or M39? Might be M39. The Finnish M39, I believe it is. Now, I don't have an M39 out here, but anyone who's ever handled a Finnish M39 knows that it is like the Cadillac of Mosins. The Finnish went to extreme lengths to get that Mosin. Just give it the utmost care to make it as comfortable as a rifle as they possibly could. It really is as good of a Mosin as a Mosin can possibly be. Now, my 1891, I've handled Russian 1891s, and they don't hold a candle compared to this thing. The fit and finish on this 1891 is so good that, assuming that the rifle's already cocked, as I unlock the system here, I can actually feel the locking lugs rubbing up against the surface and creating almost a vacuum inside of the receiver as I unlock this thing, because of how good the fit is inside of, just how good the machine work is inside of this rifle. And as it slides back into the receiver, it is just so much more, what's the word I'm looking for? The tolerances are just so much tighter, but they're exactly where they need to be for a nice, smooth system. And the trigger in this thing, although the trigger is not as good as an M39 or something like that, the trigger in this Mosin is significantly better than the trigger in any Russian Mosin I've ever used. I've also used the, I can't remember the designation, 24 something. It was another Finnish Mosin. I'll go ahead and throw in some B-roll footage from that video. But I used a Finnish Mosin that was not an 1891 pattern. And it was also an incredibly nice Mosin. The Russian Mosins, they get the job done. They go bang, you know, aim them downrange, and you'll take out your target. But the Finnish Mosins just feel so much better. They're a much better quality, much more effort was put into making those rifles much better than what the Russians did with their rifles. Russians went with quantity because of the amount of soldiers that they had, whereas the Finnish definitely went with quality. The thing is, whenever you're going up against a superior force, like the Finnish did with the Russians, the Finnish knew that they had to get more shots on target than the Russians were able to do, so they wanted their rifles to be as nice as possible and as accurate as possible to go ahead and get that job done. That said, these Russian rifles can be made to be very, very comfortable shooting rifles, and with not a lot of work, you can go ahead and set these up basically exactly how the Finnish set up their rifles. You can set up the triggers to be way better than random stock Mosin triggers, which feel like dragging a grand piano over a gravel road. And you can set up your bolts to be incredibly smooth. And if you get yourself a Mosin that isn't shot out, they can be very accurate. Now, they're not incredibly accurate, like not 6.5 Creedmoor from a modern rifle accurate, but they can absolutely be accurate. And even the ones that aren't all that accurate, they should still be accurate enough to be able to handle whatever it is you're looking to handle. Your typical Mosin is going to be anywhere from like average 3 MOA to about 5 MOA rifles. Of course, there's more accurate Mosins out there depending on what you find and, you know, how much they were used and whether or not they're a sniper variant, etc., etc. Poor Steele's been through so much. But your Russian rifles will absolutely do the job. However, your Finnish rifles, as soon as you pick up a Finnish rifle, if you pick up, like, for example, this Finnish 1891, pick up this Finnish 1891 and compare it side by side with a Mosin 1891, and you just hold them side by side, you're like, wow, I can already feel the difference. Just the difference in the wood, the difference in the way that the bolt cycles, the difference in the trigger, the difference in the accuracy, I say, with a rifle that doesn't have rear sights. I can be incredibly accurate with this rifle, even without rear sights, out to about 100 yards. But I think a lot of that has to do with just the extremely smooth single action trigger, well, not single action, single stage trigger that is in this rifle, thanks to the fins. And with it being a 91, or 1891 pattern. It does not recoil as much as the 9130. Man, these 7.62 by 54 rimmed rounds hit so hard whenever they hit their target. I gotta tighten down my barrel bands though. Looks like they're starting to walk forward. I'll have to adjust that. But the Finnish just put so much more effort in making these rifles so much better quality than the Russian ones, just because of, you know, quantity over quality. It's a couple of, I guess you'd call them opposite ideologies behind the rifles. Whenever the Russians made Mosins, they wanted as many as possible, especially, you know, in World War II, whenever they were trying to fend off the Germans. A lot of times, whenever Russia was really going through dark times, they wouldn't even bother putting markings on the receiver. They're just like, all right, rifle, don't even bother putting, you know, any sort of coating or finish on the wood or anything like that. Just rifle, here you go. Go fend off the Germans and get them out of the motherland. The Finnish were never like that. They always put in a lot of work and a lot of effort into making their rifles as good as possible, and it really shows. Even to this day, this is a 1943 refurbished rifle. I tried looking on the tang on the inside of this receiver right here. I could not find a date on it. It has been scrubbed off, but in 1943, during the Continuation War, this right here was refurbished and used in Finnish service. Don't know what it saw, but I mean, Continuation War against the Russians, that was not exactly a good time. So even despite going through that conflict and that dispute, and this being a rifle that is at this point like 80 years old, actually almost exactly 80 years old at this point, it is still in incredible shape and still incredibly accurate and still very finely polished and well tuned, and that is a true testament to the amount of effort that was put into these Finnish rifles whenever they decided to go ahead and do them, and that's why they run a little bit more money than the Russian ones do. Just the amount of effort that went into making these as good as possible. The Finnish Mosins really are like the pinnacle of what the Mosin platform can be. Alright folks, thanks for watching, appreciate your time. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are down below. Like, subscribe, share, description, links, go check it out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I'm going to go grab more ammunition. Actually, I have some ammunition out here. I have some ammo for my Kar 98. The Finnish also used a lot of 8mm Mauser stuff, just because of how available it was at the time period and because of their allies and whatnot whenever they were fighting off the Russians. And I mean, there's a lot of stories behind why the Finnish were using certain platforms. And it's interesting to think that there was a point that was on the front where, you know, things like Kar 98s and things like Mosin Nagants were, you know, on the same side on the battlefield, produced by countries that were allies. Like, there were times where Germans would pick up Mosins, you know, whether or not they were more accurate than their Kar 98s, or whether or not, you know, if they got themselves a Mosin like PU variant, or if they were dealing with like really cold weather or something like that. Mosins just work better in the cold. There are times where Germans would pick up Mosins and then you'd have Kar 98s and Mosins on the same side as well. But these are two different forces that had Kar 98s and Mosins on the same side. This is just a fascinating story. Had all sorts of stuff the Finnish did during the Second World War. Alright, well, not during the Second World War, during the Cold War, while the Second World War was going on. Cold War, Continuation War. I called it the Cold War. I guess it was cold. Continuation War. I'm gonna shut up before I keep rambling. You guys go off. Have a fantastic day. I'll see y'all on the next video.
while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.